Welcome to On the Chain.
And this is none other than Stu Alderoty. He's the general counsel over at Ripple. I thought we would just like listen to this, but he was at an event for Politico. Did you know Politico was doing stuff with blockchain, Jeff?
I had no idea, but it's interesting that he's there.
I had no idea.
We were talking earlier about the fact that you recently wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal questioning the SEC's approach to the crypto market for not providing sufficient clarity over crypto regulation. Can you elaborate on that a bit and explain why you believe the current crypto regulatory approach actually does more harm than good?
Yeah. So that since December of 2020, and that's an important day because the SEC filed a lawsuit against Ripple in December of 2020. We have not signed a single U.S. customer to our platform, but in the past 2 years, we've had the strongest years ever as a company. That $10 billion in volume mostly is driven.
Geez, Jeff, what do you think about that statement right there?
Let's go. Let's go.
Offshore. And by the way, this is all done compliant with anti-money laundering laws, OFAC laws, anti-sanction laws, etc. Why is that? Why haven't we signed a single U.S. customer in the past 2 years? Because of regulatory uncertainty and really regulatory hostility. So the piece that I wrote in the Wall Street
right there.
Regulatory
hostility.
Ooh,
that summarizes everything.
Got the guns blazing.
Regulatory hostility. Man, not happy.
Yeah, but I mean, is that the first official time we've heard that they have not signed one single U.S. customer in a year? Almost 2 years. Well, December will be 2 years. I mean, we kind of guessed, but we didn't know for sure. Is that the first
Yeah, I think that's the first official note. We've seen, a lot of movement on a global scale.
Boom.
Obviously, we saw them. Boom! Regulatory hostility. Ever. That's it.
Yeah, but I like Stu. He's so cool, calm, and collective. Look at him.
He really is, man. He just kind of handles himself.
Regulatory hostility.
Low key and just throws in the jab. Like, boom. He's just like low key.
Body blow.
No customers. Why? Well, we haven't had any because of regulatory hostility.
And Jeff, did you know he also threw in there? But we've had some of our best quarters ever.
Yeah.
So despite that, not signing one U.S. customer, you know why? Because the rest of the world isn't crazy town, Jeff. The rest of the world's like, yeah, it's a commodity. Does anybody wonder about it? No, the world that is sane. Meanwhile, in the U.S. here, we got Gary, Daddy G Gensler.
The G man. Don't get Genslered.
Don't get Gensler, Jeff. Nobody wants to get Genslered. It's over. So
don't get Genslered. So we were talking earlier. The only one person that wants to get Genslered is the Shermanator.
No, that's the only person we want, Gensler. The Shermanator. Who votes for that guy? If you guys are anywhere near his district, just go in there and start putting up signs. The Shermanator hates crypto. Please, come on, save us all, please. We cannot have that guy.
Have a great night, Christina.
Wall Street Journal was in response to an op-ed that our current chair of the SEC wrote, Gary Gensler, where he announced that the SEC was going to be the cop on the beat for crypto. Well, I don't remember anyone holding an election for the cop on the beat for crypto. I don't remember Congress appointing Gary Gensler as the cop on the beat for crypto. So I wrote an editorial basically saying you can't self-appoint yourself as the cop on the beat for crypto. And what really is happening here in the U.S., because we have such regulatory uncertainty and outright regulatory hostility through what we call regulation by enforcement, compared to sophisticated economic centers like Singapore, like London, like Dubai.
Stu, basically the rest of the world, any country that's not the U.S., just let's sum it up, okay? It's like,
oh my God, I mean, so many booms in there in that state.
Boom, so many booms going on there. Yeah, it's just so calm, cool as a cucumber. I love it. Regulatory hostility. We got to start using that, man.
If it wasn't due to the regulatory hostility, man, and the bad climate, and it's crazy too, right? Because he's talking about all these other countries. And then what do we get? We get the regulatory hostility, and then what we'll cover later is the fact sheet from the White House, where they released the first ever comprehensive framework for responsible development of digital assets. What the F does that even mean?
I can tell you what it means. Nothing. You might as well say this. I won't take up anything. It's the same thing. It means nothing. It carries zero weight, and it's a complete waste of time and a distraction.
And there you go. Yes,
and there
exactly.
you go. Alchemist says John Deaton is the guy who beats the cop.
Right.
I like the sound of that.
Cop on the beat.
Let's listen to what else.
Who appointed him anyways?
He appointed, self-appointed, self-anointed, the daddy.
I like, when he said anointed, he was right. It wasn't appointed. It was anointed.
Right. Self-anointed. I have anointed myself. Daddy G.
What we're doing here in the U.S., and I think principally through the SEC as an institution, is we're elevating politics and power over sound policy. And in doing that, you're not only hurting innovation and innovators and entrepreneurs like Ripple, and I won't name others, but there's others under attack and in the space in the U.S.
Yeah, let's name them. Library. What's the other one? Dragon Chain. There's a whole slew of them, right? I mean, ETH. Now, remember ETH? They threw ETH in the picture, saying, "Well, I mean, we should be regulated in the U.S. because
what is that all about?" He said that all of ETH falls under the jurisdiction of the U.S.
See, so he's now self-anointed himself as the cop of the globe. Okay, forget about just the U.S. He's now the cop on the beat of the globe, and everyone's like, "Dude, who are you talking to?" It's like, we don't care. The rest of the world doesn't care, which is why Ripple has been crushing it lately, because they just don't care.
That ultimately you're hurting the retail holder of this asset. 1 in 5 Americans have either hold, own, or have interacted with crypto. And that uncertainty ultimately hurts them. So when you hear the chair of the SEC saying, I'm doing this all in the name of consumer protection, actually, it's the very opposite. It's the consumer that's getting hurt. The day the SEC sued Ripple, the digital asset that we rely upon to effectuate the cross-border transactions, XRP, was delisted or suspended from trading from nearly every U.S. platform in the U.S., and $15 billion in market cap volume was erased.
But you know who didn't stop? Bitcher didn't stop. You know who else didn't? Uphold. Uphold's like, hey man, until we hear otherwise, we don't care. We're not going to follow suit. And I still have to applaud Uphold. I mean, I give them so much credit because, you know, and I mean, I know BitTrue does a lot of business here. They're actually not based here. But so what? They could have done the same thing out of fear in saying, well, because other platforms outside the U.S. also suspended trading. So
it's amazing.
Did Ripple
get $15 billion just evaporated from the market cap, and think about, you know, the overall impact on people. I mean, it's just
that's horrible, mind crushing.
Get hurt. Our business moved offshore. Who got hurt? The men and women who owned XRP in the U.S., who've been locked out of their accounts and can't access XRP in the U.S. If I could just give one more example.
Please.
In Gary Gensler's editorial, he talked about a settlement with BlockFi, a lending platform, and what a great success that was. What happened? They settled with BlockFi, and they said, if you want to be a lending platform, you have to come in and register with the SEC. For those who are paying attention, we kind of all knew there was no path to registration with the SEC because the regulatory framework wasn't there. And the SEC assessed a $100 million fine. Shortly thereafter, BlockFi was not able to make the first $10 million down payment on the $100 million fine. They went on the auction block. They were sold. 2 other companies with similar business models quickly went bankrupt. And the consumers who had funds on those platforms were left holding the bag in bankruptcy court. That does, at the end, so that was the response in the Wall Street Journal to what Gary Gensler, basically calling him out, saying, stop invoking consumer protection. Stop invoking integrity of the markets. You're hurting the consumer. Regulatory uncertainty creates havoc in the marketplace. What we need is clarity.
Why isn't Stu Alderoty? Dude,
Gensler.
they got big time Gensler, but why isn't Stu Alderoty? This guy talks to such a matter of fact, eloquently,
guy's amazing.
perfect, and with just
Amazing.
a sharp tongue like a dagger, just dicing and slicing the Gensler to pieces, but in a brilliant way. He's a brilliant mind, and I just love the fact. I've always seen bits and pieces of interviews, but this is just phenomenal. This is just open it up here. This is beautiful.
So talk about that a little bit. What exactly do they need to do, these
Talk about that a little bit. She just talked about it.
policymakers to
Talk
give?
about that a little bit. I just spent the past hour talking about it. Let's talk about it.
I didn't even give you a chance to ask a question, but go ahead. Ask the next question on your card there. That's good.
Give clarity or to actually give more certainty overall to the crypto industry?
So there's three ways you can get clarity. The first way is through regulatory rulemaking, where regulators, they publish rules, market participants weigh in and comment on those rules, and then you have rules moving forward. The markets regulators in this country have shown no willingness to do that in the crypto space. And I think they've shown no willingness to do that in the crypto space intentionally, because they like the uncertainty, because the uncertainty gives them the power. So we're not seeing anything on the regulatory rulemaking front. The second way you can get clarity is through legislation. And there are a number of bills that are working their way through Congress now to see if we can kind of clean up this mess that's been created in the U.S. You have to be careful, though, because this is a very complicated space. And if you legislate without really understanding what it is you're legislating, and if you don't get those definitions right about what is a security or what's a commodity, you actually can create more confusion through bad legislation. But I think there's a lot of good faith efforts that are going on right now, and we spend a lot of time with policymakers educating them. And then the third way you can get clarity is through litigation. And we are defending the case that the SEC filed against Ripple, and we've said this since day one. We're defending it not only on behalf of Ripple, we're defending it on behalf of the entire industry.
Yeah.
And we think that our case will provide I'll strike the word favorable, will provide clarity in terms of how to define a digital asset. And the fundamental question is, a digital asset regulated as a security?
Is stored
or is
out
it
right?
regulated as a commodity or a virtual currency? We think it should be regulated as a commodity or virtual currency, and there's a lot of substantive reasons why that's the case. And so ultimately, I think the clarity may come from the litigation process.
Now, Jeff, let's go back. Since we're going back in time, let's you and I go back in time to when the lawsuit. That's my time machine, sound effect. Where you go back in time to almost a year and a half ago, when right after the lawsuit was filed, it was late December of 2020. You and I started breaking down the complaint, and we came to the same conclusion, which was this may be the fastest way to clarity. And everyone's like, "No way, you guys are crazy! You're so ridiculous." And well, Congress hasn't done anything, and it's only gotten worse. The economic, the climate for crypto.
Yeah, it's providing at least a direction, in the absence of a level-headed Congress, which we haven't had in quite some time. This is the fastest way, would be through legislation, and it's not, or through through the court and not through legislation. And it's really unfortunate that we have to go that route. We've seen other big cases that have gone through the Supreme Court. Obviously, that's how we got the Howey test. And, look what that's got us, because now we fast forward since 1946. And here we sit with the orange fields and oranges, and we're discussing XRP and digital assets. And we have a cop on the beat, so to speak, with the Genslinator. And, and check out what he's doing. I mean, it's like, he uses one pillar of the Howey test, just one prong. And, it's all about, if you made profit. It was interesting. Somebody had posted, I don't know who, through all the readings, they're saying if you just posted, if one person out there says that he got into that crypto to earn a profit, that means that everything's a security. That's the Genslinator's philosophies. And man, but Stu is right on point. This guy is just so solid, so amazing. Handled himself very, very well. Didn't see much of an interview. More, hey, can you just elaborate and share your wealth of knowledge with us?
Well, there's part two.
Oh man, we're already into and it's awesome. Let's do it. What else we got?
Let's pull up part two. And a big shout out to James Real XRP for two reasons. A, he cut this up into two big segments, not 2 minutes and 40 seconds. And B, the volume is phenomenal. Like these Twitter videos, like, I never hear them or everything else. So James Real said, what? And everyone like turns it way up. And then you and I are say something and blow the eardrums out.
Yeah.
So let's listen into this part two here.
Would we be able to create a system that protects and empowers the more than 40 million Americans who are a part of this new crypto economy? Are there specifics within the regulatory and policy perspective that you'd like to see happen in the U.S.?
Yeah. So I think a threshold point here that needs to be made and sometimes gets lost in all of the noise is, I think, the adults in the room in this space are not asking to be free of regulation. We don't want to operate in the Wild West. We're asking for regulation, but we're asking for clear regulation. Clear regulation, consistently applied, leads to predictable results, and that's what we need. But in terms of specifics, what we need is a faithful application of the existing laws. And the SEC, although they say we're just applying the law, really what they're seeking to do is, through regulation by enforcement, remake the law. An independent agency or any agency doesn't have the authority to remake the law. Only Congress has the authority to remake the law. But ultimately what we need is a clear definition of what is a security and what is not a security. And the law kind of already gives that. The 1933 Securities Act, I've got a little legal wonky here, says the Securities and Exchange Commission, and it's right in their name, securities, they only have jurisdiction over securities. It provides a definition, a list of those things that are a security. Traditional stocks and bonds, you own a right, title, or interest in a company through a share, a debt instrument, a note, and in that laundry list, there's something called an investment contract. And what Gary Gensler says, or what the SEC says, I don't want to make this personalized to Gary Gensler, but what the institution is saying is that if you buy an asset and you hope that asset rises in value so you can trade it in the secondary market, that falls under my jurisdiction. And that's not the case, because if it were the case, if I were to sell you a bar of gold, or if I sell you a bucket of soybeans, or if I were to sell you an Andy Warhol lithograph, and then I were to go out and to promote Andy Warhol lithographs under the SEC's theory, if you can sell that Andy Warhol lithograph, or you hope to sell it at a higher price than I sold it to you, that's a security. It's not. What you need is an investment contract, which means you need a contract for an investment. A right, title, or interest in the entity that is selling you the asset. There has to be some post-sale obligation. After I sell you that Andy Warhol lithograph, I have to be contractually obligated to you or make some promise.
Okay, right there, Jeff. I want to stop it because that is the missing ingredient. There is no contractual obligation to Gary Gensler's theory. He talks about this investment contract. Okay, well, produce the contracts. Where did Ripple say at any given point that they have a fiduciary to the end user who's on that contract? Good luck. And it's that's also in the that's in the and yeah, you got Gensler. The whole thing got Gensler is underneath there, but that's exactly it. I do think I read that in was that also in the Ripple filing? I don't know, summary judgment filing. But there's no contract. So he's really nailing it right here, talking about a contract.
Yeah, he's so spot on, and it's like, thank God, for bright minds in the legal space to come out, and really put things, on the right path, because you've got this team in Washington that don't really seem to care too much about law, sticking to the law, and they're just making it up as they go along. And Stu here, he said something that was really, really important. He said that, we don't want to avoid regulation. We want regulation, just with clarity, because at the end of the day, you can't have, business operating in anarchy. Nobody's looking for anarchy. You need some rules of the road, and that's what they're referencing. But to do it the way Gensler's doing it is just, completely off base, as he tries to anoint himself as the chosen one.
He's chosen by one himself, and that's it.
By himself.
Let's listen. There's a little bit of wrap up here, but this is right at the end here.
To you that I'm going to do something on your behalf.
A little bit.
Obligation after I selling you the asset. There has to be some post-sale obligation. After I sell you that Andy Warhol lithograph, I have to be contractually obligated to you or make some promise to you that I'm going to do something on your behalf that you can hold me accountable for if I don't do it. That is a security, and most cryptos don't fall under that definition. That's an asset, and it's probably an asset that trades in a spot secondary market, and that's more of a traditional world of commodities that falls under the CFTC's jurisdiction.
Man. And then what's next? They're gonna go to these big conventions and shake down kids because they're trading baseball cards, or they're trading the Marvel cards. I mean, Pokemon cards. I mean, it's the same sort of a thing. It's like, you bought this card, and I sometimes I watch those videos on YouTube, and it'd be some kid walks up at a table and starts wheeling and dealing for a card. It's like $8 grand. He's like, I want cash. The guy's like, you drive a hard bargain. He's like, I think they ended up selling around $7,500, but the kid didn't pay that for it. So that kid's going off to jail because of he's selling a security. This is how ridiculous it is. And the whole thing about the Howey test is ridiculous anyway. The way they came at it with the orchard, what John Dean makes the point over and over again. The oranges were not the security. It was the scheme in which they put it together. It was and they did have a contract. People did sign a contract for the plot of land, with the Howey cases built. They had the orange grows. They got so many orange trees on a grow. They had a contract. There's no contract here, man. So I love this. I love this approach. Beautiful, brilliant.
Are you down with OTC? Please like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when the next video drops.